Welcome to Uncontained, episode 156. I'm your host, Aaron Static Render, and today is a solo episode, so it may be a little shorter than your normal episodes. It is the birthday episode for Uncontained, turning 3 years old on March 1st, we'll call it, because actually it launched on February 29th, Leap Day. We'll call the first my birthday until there actually is another February 29th, which will be on my fourth show birthday. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to the show, whether you've been here from the very first day to just joining and listening to Uncontained recently. I appreciate each and every one of you, and if you guys could just spread the word of the show, that would be helpful too, because if you enjoy listening to it, I'm sure others will too, and that will help people, find the show get more listeners, and the show continue on. So that being said, I'm doing these shows in a way to try to communicate with you guys a little bit better, I want to hear what you guys think, what your feedback is on the show. So please hit me up on social media. It's at Uncontained Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to hear more of. And, I'll try to get that. If you have somebody you want to hear on the show, let me know that as well. And if you can make the connection, that is even better. So this episode won't all be about Uncontained turning 3. But I will say that I was listening to the ID10T podcast, formerly the Nerdist podcast, with Chris Hardwick as a host. And I heard a quote that really kind of caught my attention. And I was like, I gotta share that with people. So you might see it on my Instagram a little bit later. I don't know if Chris Hardwick came up with this quote himself, but he was the one that shared it on what he's calling the word salad or word salad rap that he does at the end of his shows from time to time now. But the quote is, "There is no artistry in perfection. The cracks are where life is interesting." And that hit me as like so true, because have you ever listened to something that was completely polished, completely, everything where it needs to be, all neat and tidy, and even though the content's good, you've been kind of bored with it just because it's so polished. And then you hear this amateur documentary or something where there are errors in there, but that's what makes it interesting. And same with life. And also, I think wanting perfection before you release something can actually stop art from happening or something creative from happening. Like, for example, before I launched this show, I was thinking about launching this show for quite some time. Maybe even a couple years. My girlfriend was pushing me to go through with it, giving me that extra little nudge I needed to go through with it and everything. But I was like, I don't have all the pieces in place yet. I want to get everything set up, and that kept me from getting the show going. So who knows? Uncontained could be turning 6 this year if I would have jumped right in, didn't test the waters, didn't, just dangle a toe in the water and like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know if I want to get completely wet yet. The thing is, if you let not having a perfect show stop you from having a show, you will never have a show. Okay, and it goes along with this one of the sayings that I really like. I believe it's by Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder, where it says, if you are not embarrassed by your first product that you release, you waited too long. And no matter how long you wait, you are going to be embarrassed by your first product later on. At least you hope so, because that shows that you are growing, that there's growth happening in what you're doing. If I went back to my show that I did 3 years ago, my first show, listened to that, and I was completely satisfied with that, there would be something wrong. I can go back, listen to it. Okay, that was good for starting out. But if I went back there and saw absolutely no growth between the show that I released last week or this show and that show, then I really should be trying a little bit harder or something like that. But it's those imperfections in that show that allow you to grow. It allows you to change a few things. It allows you to experiment. When you get down in those cracks, as Chris Hardwick referred to it as, that's when you're going to find the happy little accidents, just like Bob Ross talked about in the Art of Painting or Joy of Painting. And just a little tangent on Bob Ross. Have you ever noticed when you were watching his show, back when it was on, now it's on Netflix if you want to check it out. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you can check it out for yourself. But there's been times where, the painting isn't going exactly as he wanted it to in the beginning. And that's when he says there's no such thing as mistakes, just happy accidents. And he takes that little ink blot or paint splotch that he didn't necessarily mean to be in that position and turns it into a happy little tree. Then he gives another happy little tree. And next thing you know, he's like, you're like, okay, this painting's looking awesome. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to put a pond over here. You're like, no, what? This picture doesn't need a pond. But he's like, this area needs a pond. So he puts like big old splotch of blue there. And you're like, oh man, he just ruined the painting. And then next thing you know, bam, there's a beautiful pond to go along with the ducks and the happy little trees and makes this beautiful little scenery thing. But it's from that little imperfection that he viewed as a happy little accident instead of a mistake and made something artistic out of it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling, but that's how I viewed the joy of painting, looking back on it as a kid, and I felt it kind of tied in with this whole statement from Chris Hardwick where there is no art in perfection. And I don't know. Some people may argue that, like, say, if you're doing ballet or like Olympic high diving or something like that, that splash wasn't perfect, so you'll be deducted by it. So, but in my opinion, after you get that perfection, it becomes more of a science than an art. And when you're striving for this quote unquote perfection, this set rule of standards, this it has to be just like this or nothing, that takes away the area for you to come in and put your own touch on it. It takes away those little cracks and crevices where you can let your personality shine through, that crack in the pavement where that rose grows up through. Now, with that being said, that there is no artistry in perfection, what's interesting in life lies in the cracks, mean that you shouldn't strive to improve your craft. No. It doesn't mean strive for imperfection. It doesn't, because you are going to be imperfect. Perfection is inachievable. And as soon as we accept that, I think more people will be willing to create. But a lot of things that are stopping them is striving for that perfection to come out with the perfect product, and it's not going to happen. So don't strive for imperfection. Just strive to do the best you can and continually improve on what you're doing, knowing that you won't get to that perfection anyway. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting quote. I'm glad it caught my mind. I'm glad I heard it. It kind of perked my ears up. And I also thought it was kind of fitting for the birthday episode of this show, because when I wanted to release this show, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that was stopping me. I wanted to make sure when my show came out, it was good enough production-wise, quality-wise, and stuff. Because before doing a podcast, I did radio for 7 years, and it was a little bit different format. I'm sure I did some interviews, but for the most part, it was not long interview format. And it was kind of intimidating to try to fill half hour with an interview, and get all these guests lined up and ready to go. So you just got to go for it. Get a few interviews, get a few of them stacked up before you go if you're getting into podcasting, and then launch and roll with it. If you try to be consistent, if you do end up missing an episode, it's okay. Roll with it. People will end up forgiving you if you miss an episode, but consistency is important because your listener wants to know that they can come back and hear a new show every week. I let all of that weigh me down and slow me down in launching my podcast. And I eventually figured out there's some groups on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter that you can get into and find guests for your show, along with going out to areas where your guests might be. For example, a comedy show. Go watch them perform, see if you like them, then invite them on your show if it's a comedy show. Or if you're a business show, go to a business conference and invite the guests on your show. So I guess thinking about perfection can slow you down. Yes, you want a good product, but if you get hung up on being perfect about it, every little thing in place, every little edited out, it's just gonna slow you down in the long run. But yes, you want to strive to be better. So I guess what I'm saying is don't let perfection slow you down. Look for the beauty of your art in the cracks and also in the happy accidents. So just because it's an accident doesn't mean something awesome can't come from it. Now, as far as my goals that I've mentioned in my last solo episode of wanting to go forward and pursue voiceover and stand-up comedy, I have been taking some classes for the audio editing part of it to make sure when I do create my demo that I can edit it and make it sound good. And also when I submit audio, it will sound good. Plus, working on making the podcast through those classes sound better too. It's audition ready by the voiceover guru Tim Tibbetts. You should definitely check it out. Is learn how to work the EQ, adjust the sound, remove sibilants and pops and plosives and all that good stuff from it. And then also to chase after what I want. I am currently writing some things down as far as jokes go as I'm walking around carrying a notebook with me, getting closer and closer to, that day where I actually do step back up on stage. So, yeah, that's what's going on with me right now. What's going on with you guys? Hit me up and let me know how you are doing, what you're working on, if you have any projects that you're working on, or what's holding you up. And if there's something or somebody I could talk to on the show that would help you get to where you need to go. That's kind of what this show is about. Yes, it's getting to know what the entertainer is up to, but also getting advice from that entertainer in his or her specific area of expertise on how you can get there. So let me know if there's something that you want to hear. Once again, you can hit me up across social media at Uncontained Pod, which that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They're all the same right there. Then you can also hit me up at my website, uncontainedpod.com. So, yeah, please let me know. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you're thinking, what you're hearing. If you're liking what you're hearing, if you want to hear something else, think the show may be missing something, please let me know. Or if the show has helped you step out and take that first step to doing what you want to do, I'd also love to hear those stories as well. I was in that position once when I was looking to launch, and once you do it, it does. And just over 3 years ago, I was in that position too, when I was waiting for something to happen to launch my show, where I was wanting to post but wasn't sure if I was ready. And honestly, the hardest part, not saying there's not other obstacles, but the hardest part is that first launch. They say the first thing I recommend you do is just get up there on stage and do it, or just do what you're doing. It is the biggest part to doing it and keeping doing what you're doing in order to gain notoriety, more followers, recognition, you have to be consistent with it. I just wanted to share a few things with you. That quote from Chris Hardwick, there's no artistry in perfection. The cracks are where life is interesting. Really, really triggered something in my mind and stuck with me. So I wanted to share that and then share what my thoughts of that or my interpretation of that quote was with you guys here. And also just thank you guys for listening and continuing to share the show. That is huge. I can definitely tell that you're getting out there, spreading the word. And if you're feeling extra generous for the birthday of the show, please go to iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Leave a review and rating, and also share it with a friend. That'd be the biggest birthday present from you. Also, I have recently just claimed my podcast on Himalaya. It's a podcast player that seems really cool. It's an app you can download in the Android and iTunes store. Also, there's a little contribute button to the podcast that you like, so you can support your favorite podcasts on there. And the cool thing is, unlike some of the other apps that allow you to give money to the creators that you like, 100% of what you donate goes to the podcaster or the artist that you are supporting. They don't take like a 15% share out of it or anything. So you can count on whatever you donating going to help out that artist. And whether it's me or whether it's somebody else you like listening to, that is a really cool feature. So if you download the Himalaya app, find me on there, add me, and if you're kind enough or if you feel it in you, support. I'm not sitting out front of a convenience store with a styrofoam cup asking for money, but if you do want to throw money in my hat, I'm cool with that. So thank you for listening, and please, if you have any questions, any comments, I'd love to hear from you. Any suggestions for the show, that'd be great going into this next year. I want to grow. I want to make this show as better as possible. Obviously, going back to the quote that I started off the show with, perfection isn't necessarily the goal, but being better always is, and bringing that artistry out of the cracks in life. That's where you find the interesting stuff. So thank you for listening, and until next time, live uncontained.